Welcome to Georgia Life Sciences Podcast, bringing you the latest insights and innovations from Georgia's life sciences industry. I'm your host, Maria Thacker Goethe, President and CEO of Georgia Life Sciences, formerly known as Georgia Bio, and I'm excited to take you behind the scenes with industry leaders, innovators, and policymakers shaping the future of biotech and medtech across the Peach State. Today, we're joined by Steve Damon, CEO of Micron Biomedical and Georgia Bio's chairman. In this episode, we'll dive into the critical role Georgia Bio plays in supporting biotech and medtech startups, as well as Micron's innovative needle-free drug delivery technology. We'll also explore key insights on non-traditional funding sources and the future of Georgia's life sciences ecosystem. Whether you're a young entrepreneur seeking advice or interested in the growth of biotech in Georgia, this conversation is packed with valuable insights you won't want to miss. So stay tuned. Wow, we're really excited to welcome you today to the first recording of Georgia Bio's new podcast. For our first guest, we have Mr. Steve Damon. He has been a longtime leader with over 30 years in the biotech and medtech industries, and he currently serves as CEO of Micron Biomedical. I'm really excited to learn about Micron, but I think it's important to note I've known Steve for the last 18 and a half years that I've been with Georgia Bio, since his time at Altea and Femasys and very exciting times at MAP Pharmaceuticals, and of course at 4P Thereapeutics, where he served as CEO and president before taking over as the CEO of Micron Biomedical, which we're going to learn so much more about today. So Steve, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Maria. It's good to see you.
You too. So Steve, I want to start off. It's really important to note that as a member and chair of Georgia Bio's board of directors and an important member of our community, what excites you most about Georgia Bio's current initiatives and our impact on Georgia's biotech and medtech communities?
What excites me most about Georgia Bio, coming from where I come from and the smaller companies and the startup companies, it excites me that we have an industry organization like Georgia Bio that is there for small companies and startup companies coming out of academia or wherever with new inventions and technology for either the medtech or the biotech space. It excites me because those technologies without support may never make a market. And what's important is when they do, these inventions could come onto the market and change the world. And we certainly have a lot of talent in Georgia. And I really am excited that Georgia Bio is there to help them. A good example of some of the support Georgia Bio provides is basically, there's a project initiative on creating a 10-year roadmap for the life science industry in Georgia, and basically creating a path for people to understand the future and to be able to utilize. So I'm very excited about that part of what Georgia Bio is doing. I'm excited that, and what thrills me the most is the way they can help the smaller companies. Having said that, I would say that they also help a lot of larger companies because they provide the advocacy we need for the bigger pharmas. That's also very important to me.
As we look forward to 2025 legislative session, we have an exciting legislative agenda that we're working on with our policy and advocacy committee, which is significant not only for our big companies, but including our small startup companies and those innovators at the academic level. And you mentioned our roadmap. I'm really excited to kick that project off in 2025 to really define where we as a state can go and what we need to do to achieve those goals that we have as a growing industry, because biotech is the fastest growing sector in our state. You mentioned Georgia Bio supporting the smaller companies. So how does Georgia Bio support the growth and innovation of companies like Micron Biomedical, particularly in the medtech and biotech sectors?
Right. And you mentioned in my intro that there's been a few companies I've been involved with in my career. And it's very important that you have a place of connection, essentially. And that's what Georgia Bio is. First and foremost, it's the place you can go for all the questions you have, all the information you need, basically a network of resources that we need. So I would highly recommend that we continue to be that for industry. But that's really what Georgia Bio provides, is that place to meet people, if you have a question about resources or services, you can reach out into Georgia Bio and find out where those services exist. You can find places from facilities to legal services to science, and also places to hire people as you grow your companies. Where do you find people that you need? So Georgia Bio is that for industry, and I'm very excited. One of the highlights of what's going on at Georgia Bio right now is we've just hired a director of entrepreneurship and innovation, and that's going to be very important. It just basically supports and reinforces what I just said, a place for everybody to come together and get what they need to move their companies and their technologies forward.
Yes, we're excited to have that new role for the organization. The organization's 35 years old, and we've never really had anybody focused in that area. And as the industry's grown and we've seen more and more innovations come out of our universities, we want to provide that support that they may need as they transition out of academia and help support them as they grow their company and help keep them in Georgia. So as we develop programming and reach to the community, we're excited to build things like a mentoring network, an accelerator, and some other things. So we're excited to reach out and lean into leaders like yourself. So talking about younger leaders and young entrepreneurs and companies, what advice do you have for our young entrepreneurs and companies looking to grow in our life sciences sector here in Georgia?
Sure. And by the way, just so you know, Maria, I'm doing my job. I provide this advice every time I run into them, and it's simply get involved. And depending on the stage of your company, you can go to a Georgia Bio event. Just be at an event to network and to hang out with the people, ask questions, learn. But of course, as soon as you're able, I would highly recommend that they become members again to be close to what's happening in the industry in Georgia Bio. I think I would talk about Micron right now in the way that we were able to do that, having a source like Georgia Bio to find the things that we needed along the way. We actually started out with a foundation or an agency like Georgia Research Alliance, where we were able to, as a small company coming out of academia, we were able to find some initial seed money. We continue to work with Georgia Research Alliance, and those are connections we made through Georgia Bio, by the way. It's all connected with the infrastructure in Georgia. We also were able to utilize clean room space at Global Center for Medical Innovation. I mean, these are. If it wasn't for these resources that we learned about through Georgia Bio and that we've utilized in Georgia, it's arguably we may never have made it to the market where we are today. And Micron is on the verge of changing the world in a very, very positive way. So I have to say we're a company that has definitely been able to utilize resources within Georgia, starting with Georgia Bio, and take advantage of those to get to the point where we can create information and data and move our technology to a point where actually outside investors want to be a part of what we're doing and help us build the company.
That's great. And our ecosystem is really evolving. We recently welcomed and did the ribbon cutting for Portal Innovations, our first life sciences incubator in the state. It's exciting to have that here in Atlanta. And we've seen Science Square come up, another place to bring the community together. And Georgia Bio is happy to be a partner with them, along with others like GRA and TCMI and those critical infrastructure and ecosystem things that are necessary in order to have a healthy and thriving life sciences ecosystem. And as we continue to grow, we know that assets like this are critical to keep companies. And I will say thank you for staying in Georgia. Not every leader decides to do that, but you've really been dedicated to the state through your time as a leader across various companies. But let's hear about your company. Micron's needleless drug delivery technology, it's really revolutionary. Could you share how it's shaping the future for drug and vaccine delivery and the role Georgia has played in the success of Micron?
Absolutely. Like I just said, the services and the support we receive from Georgia is a critical part of why we're here today. Micron is focused on replacing needles and injections when it comes to delivering vaccines and drugs. It's as simple as that. And what that means is that we're providing a much greater access to critical life-saving vaccines and drugs. And how we do that is we basically have a small little button that looks like this. And instead of a needle, you put a little button on your wrist, you click the little button, and then you take it off and throw it away. And you do that self-administration. You can do that with a low-skilled caregiver. You can do that in your home. So by doing that, improving access, we're improving access globally. The two things that we're moving out of the chain is basically the need of an experienced physician and the need of refrigeration on some of these vaccines and drugs. So by doing that, we're making it much easier for people to access them. It's also very convenient in certain cases, but where that has an impact, and I would say that because of our technology and because of what we can do in the world, currently we have investors like BARDA, which is the U.S. government. We work with the CDC. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have worked closely with us and provide us a lot of support. And I can use that as one of our examples of what we're accomplishing at Micron Biomedical. I should also, before I get into that, mention that this invention comes out of Georgia Tech, as well as utilizing the resources in Georgia. So with the Bill and Melinda Gates support, we were able to deliver the measles and rubella vaccine in Africa. And why that's important is there are places in Africa, in the rural areas and in the villages, where measles is still killing, a large killer of children. That's just unacceptable because we have a vaccine that's 100% effective, and children are still dying. So but that hurdle, the reason that happens, that they're not getting vaccinated, is again because of access to the physician to administer, access to the refrigeration in some of these smaller rural areas and villages. So by Micron being able to take our technology and either put it in the mail or put it on somebody's backpack and move it into where it needs to go, the moms and the other people in the villages and stuff can then vaccinate their children as young as 9 months. And we did our clinical trial there with success that showed that our little button was as good or better than a subcutaneous injection by the physician. And again, arguably, if you think that otherwise those children would not have been vaccinated, then we're already starting to save lives. So eradicating measles deaths in a place like Africa is a critical objective of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they have supported us with our technology to help make that happen. That's one example. We've also done the same with a seasonal flu right here in Georgia, doing our clinical trials at Emory, where we showed that you could self-administer your own seasonal flu with this little button and have better than or equal to results of an intramuscular injection. So the technology is currently moving forward. Commercial manufacturing is underway. In the next few years, you'll start to see it on the market, making greater access both globally, national health security in the case of pandemics in the future, maybe not having to stand in line at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, in the case of national security as we need to, and what I call social impact, where even in high-income countries like the United States and in high-income great places like Atlanta, we still have populations that don't have access to primary care, don't have access to physicians. But we can get this to them in a much simpler and easier way so they can get, again, the critical medicines that they need. That's Micron.
No, that's so exciting. So just to put in a nutshell, I think your website puts it really simply. So it's needle-free, it's thermostable, and it's a vaccine and therapeutic delivery. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. And you don't need a sharps container when you're done.
Oh, that's even better. No sharps container when you're done, and thermostable, just to make sure it's clear. So there's no need for refrigeration to a certain point?
There's mostly no need. It's either completely eliminates refrigeration depending on the vaccine, or it highly reduces it so that you'll never again would have to think about, for example, 80 degree, minus 80, that kind of thing that we were dealing with COVID. Micron works in the same areas, COVIDs and measles and rotavirus, rotavirus for the CDC, diarrhea events are killing children around the world. We're doing all that kind of stuff. And we also work in high income places like dermatology or weight loss and things like that.
Oh, wow. Wow. So there's so many indications that this device can really impact and help increase access to care for and prevention to communities, not just here in the States, but all around the world, to improve public health for all. That's just really outstanding. And thank you for mentioning Georgia Tech. I mean, our research universities are outstanding, and we have so many innovations like this that spin out of our universities. Can you tell me a little bit more about the timeline? How, just for those audience and those listeners that may not be from our industry, how Micron got started in that time frame to where you are today, so people can better understand that this doesn't happen overnight.
That's right. So I've been a drug delivery, vaccine delivery business guy. I'm not the science guy for, like you said, about 30 years. So it's something I focus on. And what I learned along the way was when you invent a technology to do something better, to deliver your drugs or your vaccines better, that's great, but is it commercially viable? And that's where you spend a lot of your time. It's not just enough to show that you can do a better job delivering it, but can you do it in a way that the public can afford it, that they can utilize it? And that's where you spend your time. And that's where Micron spent a lot of time. So you have to design it. You've got to change things. And then you also have to invent manufacturing. So what? You invented a new technology, but how's it going to get manufactured? Which again, goes right to how much it's going to cost eventually. So we've spent about 10 years now, quite frankly, a little under 10 years, getting to the point where we are. So there's a lot of innovation, a lot of invention, a lot of changing, adapting, and getting a product to be commercially viable like we have, where we expect our product to launch in markets, like I just explained, in low middle income countries where you have to be in the low $2 range per product, as well as in the high income. So you have to have something that's simple, easy to use, and low cost. And so we've spent a lot of our time and money and efforts there. The important part for the resources that we've been talking about today is in the beginning of these inventions, when you have to resolve a lot of problems, you have to create data. Investors don't want to give you money at that stage because it's just highly, highly risky. So you not a lot of money anyway. So you gather some money, and you need to have resources that are inexpensive or free even to get these things done. And that's important. That's why the industry and the associations like Georgia Bio are so important to small companies. It gives us the boost we need until we can get the attention of the investors. In our case at Micron, it was the U.S. government, in fact, as well as others.
No, that's really exciting. And you mentioned the investor aspect. You've had some unique funding compared to what we traditionally see and approach things a little differently. You mentioned BARDA, which for those that don't know what that means, that's the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority. And there's also newer agencies like ARPA-H and their Investor Catalyst that are creating unique and new ways to find funding. But you also mentioned Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and others. Could you just talk a little bit about more non-traditional funding? I know that's a bit of a passion for you.
I absolutely can. And just so Micron created a company with funding that's non-traditional from foundations and agencies and some others. It's more strategic, but that was by design. I've been around a long time, and Micron came out of Georgia Tech and out of Georgia with a culture that really was, let's have a global impact. Let's not just try to build a company. This is just our culture. I'm not saying it should be everybody's, but we want to change the world as well as make our money for our investors. And that gives us an opportunity to work with non-traditional investors. So we went out looking for investors that had a focus on what we wanted to do, as well as the pharma companies, frankly. And I think that in today's world, in fact, those investors are probably some of the best people to be thinking about because, quite frankly, they do have the funds. And they're much, much more willing to take risk than a typical VC who has to quantitatively figure out how fast am I going to get my money back at times 10 or 20 times money. An investor like a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they're actually a charity that grants money, or the CDC or the BARDA, the U.S. government, or some others that we're working with that aren't disclosed. They have a focus, and they want to help us get that start, much like the industry at Georgia Tech. And so we were able to say, hey, we can do this. We can help people get access. We can change measles, rubella. We can change other things that I can't disclose today. Or we can make a pandemic distribution of a drug for the next pandemic epidemic. We can make that happen faster. Everybody around the world cares about that. And they care about that more than making money. And so you're able to reach that. But guess what? You can do a product, what I like to call a crossover product, as a company for profit, and you can get investment in a product like a vaccine for measles or whatever that also has value in high income markets. So while they help you fund your product to help change the world in certain markets, you can then bring it back and make a profit in the high income markets. But you're not going to make profit in lower income markets as much as you can in higher income markets. So just understanding that and working with the non-traditional investors is important, that you understand their motivations and their mandates, in fact, and you follow. And if you have a product that can follow their mandates, I highly recommend you make those connections through agencies and foundations around the world, not just in the United States. There's some in Europe as well as Asia. And then eventually the VCs, by the way, with Micron, the VCs and the investors, they want to come in. I just don't need them right now. I need investors that are focused on the same things we are. So I talk about non-traditional all the time, but I think it's a good time and place in the world to be thinking about non-traditional investors more than we think about just the traditional investors.
No, I think it's so exciting how you've approached this, and I love that it was by design with the company. And you mentioned unique partnerships and the people around you. Just One last thing on Micron. Can you tell me a bit about your team? I know you have some great team members around you, but and particularly how critical that leadership and executive team are for the success of a company. Because I know you have a lot of experience in that and how it can make or break a company. So just any tips for our early stage entrepreneurs?
Certainly, and Mary, it'll be different for different companies. So I'm just going to give you my opinion, my example. And in our company, we're focused on the science. We spun out of Georgia Tech, out of Dr. Prousnitz's labs. He reached out. I've always been close with him because he's a drug delivery guy like me, but he's a lot smarter. But he reached out to a couple of his ex-students to form the company, and that's Dr. McAllister and Sebastian Henry, and those three founded the company. When I got involved to basically commercialize it, by design for me was to really hire the leadership in science and keep the leadership in science going, not necessarily in business. We had a very, very short business team because we didn't need a big business team. We just need the scientists to do the work. We have a specific business model where our partners pay for everything. They pay for all the R&D for the technology that we're developing for them in our pipeline. And so I needed the science team to support that pipeline. We probably have a dozen products in our pipeline right now. And the leadership of both Devin McAllister and Sebastian Henry is what drives our company right now. Those two founders, they came on board. Dr. Prousnitz remains at Georgia Tech as an advisor, and he's actually a board member. But that's the science leadership that we have. I've recently started building scientific advisors like the ex-CEO of Gavi, Seth Berkley. We also working with the ex-leader of Drive at BARDA, Sandeep Patel, is part of our advisory boards now. We're bringing on some exciting new names that I can't say today, but we'll also have some that'll help me focus on the markets and the things that we need. But in my company, it's about building the scientific leadership team and doing the work first and making sure you get your revenue streams based on that work up, and then keeping the business team, which can be expensive, down to a smaller amount initially.
No, that's great. That's helpful advice. Well, thank you so much for telling us all about Micron. As we close up, I have one final question, bringing it back to Georgia and our strong and evolving life sciences ecosystem. But I think you and I both know there's still a lot of room for growth as Georgia continues to grow its life sciences sector. It continues to be the fastest growing and the highest paying industry in the state. But in your view, what kind of support and investment is really needed from the state, people in the state, public or private, to help the industry reach its full potential?
We need more support, more financial support. We need Georgia's government to help motivate investors to come here to pay attention to what's going on. We have the academia. It's like and when I look at it, from my opinion, we're so underutilized. We have so much talent in our university systems. We have a great airport. We have everything you're supposed to have. We need more support for that. Quite frankly, other states are getting, whether it be South Carolina, Alabama, or the obvious ones up in Boston and in California. We need that support because Micron's the great example. We're the poster child. Other people have thought about replacing needles and injections and making life easier for the world, but they failed. And in fact, without the support that we were able to find, and we did have to go out, as you've heard me talk about non-traditional investment stuff, we're clearly going to accomplish that goal. And that's going to change the world to a positive. So we need to support. It builds the economy, and it creates some motivation for people to want to work here, to want to come to the universities. I just can't say enough about how important it would be to see more support from the Georgia government. And the kind of support that startups need is going to be a little different depending on the startups. It's not necessarily tax breaks, frankly. It's hard to have a tax break when you're spending money every year. You got to pool the tax breaks. I won't get into details, but it's the kind of money that makes sense, the kind of support that makes sense. Whatever's subsidizing, and it's way above my head and my pay grade, but I know we need more of it. And keeping places like Georgia Bio or support in place in the funding that Georgia Bio needs, that's a big, big part of it.
Oh, thank you. Georgia Bio's role, and first and foremost, in its mandate, is to be the singular voice when it comes to working at the state capitol. We're very proud to also work in partnership with Bio and AdvaMed and Pharma at the federal level and many local municipalities as well to help educate them on the industry. But yes, if we're going to keep up as a state and remain competitive in our region, it is critical to see some growing and new support for the industry. That we see in other states. There's a number of best practices out there, but it's getting more competitive in our region as we see large scale manufacturing moving down here and companies really thinking about Georgia in new and exciting ways. AbbVie recently this summer announced they're putting an office here, and hopefully that relationship will build and we'll be able to continue to see growth like that come to our states in our region. But we do have to remain competitive with the nearby states that we see continued investment into their industry, so we can continue to win not only the big projects, but the small companies that are really the bulk of our sector. So, well, we look forward to continue to working with you as our chairman. Thank you so much for your leadership. It's been outstanding to work with you and know you, of course, for the entirety of my career at Georgia Bio. And I'm excited about 2025 as we work to map out with community partners like Georgia Research Alliance, of course, our universities, state partners, and many others, where we want to go as an industry and what do we need and what are those best practices that we can look towards in other states to make sure that we can continue to grow this sector and provide the support that our businesses spinning out of our universities really need. The state's done an outstanding job, and we want to provide them some of those ideas to help continue to move us forward. As I, close out I just wanted to provide you a moment for any last comments, Steve, and ask you, one last thing in one line. Why Georgia? I know you've given the business case, but if you were just to tell someone considering Georgia, why Georgia? Because we get asked that quite a bit during our economic development meetings.
Well, that's another whole podcast, Maria. I love Georgia. I mean, first and foremost, I love the diversity. I love the diversity from the people to the climates to the landscaping. Everything about it, I'm very much in love with. So, always have. So that's my thing. And I think if somebody's asking me that, I'm going to tell them, you have talent coming out of universities that essentially is just a lot easier to access than you would be in any other state. Frankly, these are very talented people from very high level universities. And a lot of times they have to leave the state because, they're not homes for them. So the talent is there again. The infrastructure is there. The industry, the airport is there, which is very important. And the cost of living. The cost of living is still reasonable in this world we're in. So, I mean, I can't imagine there's a reason not to be here. Of course, I've heard that from some people who've never been here that we have 10-inch bugs or something like that, or it's too hot to be here or something. But that's just, as we've been in nice 60, 70 degree, 80 degree weather for the last several weeks. It's a beautiful, beautiful place to live.
Thankfully, there's also air conditioning was also invented. So we're very good at using that down south. But Well, thank you so much for your thoughts on why Georgia. I think that's really important too. And thank you so much for joining Georgia Bio's new podcast, BioBeat. Hope to have you again in the future as well. But it was really exciting to learn about the global impact and how Micron is changing the world and impacting public health and drug and therapeutic delivery to really improve access to care for patients and communities. To learn more about Micron, you can go to micronbiomedical.com. And thank you again for joining us, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Georgia Life Sciences podcast series. If you enjoyed the conversation, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast. It helps us reach more listeners like you. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. For more insights into Georgia's thriving life sciences community, be sure to visit us at galifesciences.org. And thanks again for listening. We'll catch you next time.